Hey, welcome everybody. It's a little bit past 3 o'clock, at least in Amsterdam, in the United States. It's a little earlier, but it's not super early as far as I remember. And it's a great pleasure to host today Nick Diaz and Yphtach Lelkes, both from the University of Pennsylvania. Nick is a PhD student at Annenberg School and works with Yphtach and his group. And Yphtach Lelkes is a former colleague of ours at the University of Amsterdam at the Amsterdam School of Communication Research. And I personally share a lot of good memories of the times that we were supposed to be in our flexible office spaces, but basically took together one office to work together. And I think that it was a very inspiring time, the years that we've been able to sit together in Amsterdam and laid the foundation for a nice friendship and also some nice joint papers that we have written over the past years. I don't, maybe for some of you who are here today, you are aware that Yphtach has been doing some excellent work on effective polarization, but not only that, the effects of political communication, digital transformations on political outcomes. And together with Nick, they have done a really cool paper in the HAPS recently, where they look at the extent to which policies and parties try to disentangle that complex interrelationship. So if you haven't read that, just go and read it. Today, they're gonna tackle another important question. I think the commonly held easy versus hard issue distinction. So again, I guess Yphtach is gonna tell us the world is more complicated than we thought it was, but that is without having seen the paper. So Yphtach, it's a pleasure to see you here. I hope personally that we can at some point also meet again in real life again, but for now I'm gonna enjoy the time here on the virtual environment. For those of you who are new here today, Yphtach will give a talk for 20-30 minutes, and then there will be a possibility to ask your questions. You can do this by typing your questions in the Q&A box, and then Christian in Amsterdam will read them out, and the difficult questions will obviously be answered by Nick, and the easier speculation questions will be answered by Yphtach, or in the other order. Anyways, Yphtach, the floor is yours, and I'm very much looking forward to your talk.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be in Amsterdam, even if it's virtual. Though I'm excited that things are looking up, so maybe I can come visit again soon. And yeah, I look very much fondly upon my time at ASCOR and Barrett and I abusing the free coffee privilege and basically leaving with a garbage bag full of cups at the end of the day. So yeah, it's great to be here. Let me set this up. Okay, you can see my screen. Cool, yeah, so this is a project that Nick and I have been working on. As with my other stuff with Nick is really the brains behind the operation, and I just take the credit. But yeah, it's at best joint work. More likely, it's Nick is leading this project.
Not true. It's kind, but not true.
All right. So what I'm going to be talking about is kind of centered around issues and why they matter. A central premise in democratic theory is that people should have opinions on issues and use these opinions to guide their behavior when it comes to voting for candidates. Aiken and Bartels call this the folk theory of democracy. And they write, in the conventional view, democracy begins with the voters. Ordinary people have preferences about what their government should do. They should choose leaders who will do those things, or they enact their preferences directly in referendums. Similarly, Aiken wrote 40 years or so earlier, if the public cannot understand and develop independent opinions about public policy issues, democratic theory loses its starting point. And if you read the Aiken and Bartels book, you know that they kind of criticize this. point of view, but we still think that this folk theory is important, and it sometimes applies, but the application of people applying their preferences on issues to their behavior really depends on the issue at hand. And kind of the canonical citation on this of which issues people apply their attitudes on to behavior comes from Carmines and Simpson, who wrote a piece in 1980. It's one of the most cited papers in APSR on the two faces of issue voting. So we know that most citizens don't have strong, consistent, or stable attitudes about public policy on most issues. This was established most famously by Converse in the 1960s, at least in America. I mean, it does differ a bit in countries. Americans tend to fare poorly compared to you Europeans. But there is, even in Europe, I think, some variance on how well people can apply issues. And this variance, it's Carmines and Simpson, right, has to do with how well citizens can understand an issue. And these issues vary. So for instance, some issues such as abortion and immigration are far more stable and predictive of vote choice than others. In Europe, it would be probably immigration. These issues are often thought to lie either at one end of a continuum or just a different category of issue difficulty. So in their influential article, Carmines and Simpson introduced the notion of easy and hard issues to argue that easy issues are so readily understood, that they're so easy to make sense of, that they cannot be used to gauge citizens' political sophistication. Everybody can use an easy issue to guide their behavior. So this is what that paper is mostly about, and this is the paper that we're kind of examining. So let me start by just defining what an easy and a hard issue is according to Carmines and Simpson. Easy issues elicit gut responses across those with high and low political sophistication, while hard issues require specialized knowledge. So a canonical easy issue would be something like abortion or immigration. Oh, immigration is kind of a middle ground, actually. Abortion, or Barrett and I once did a study where we said euthanasia was an easy issue. That didn't work as well as we thought, but we tried. Hard issues require specialized knowledge. They're things like taxes, redistribution. Easy issues are symbolic and can be understood symbolically. Hard issues are technical. Easy issues are focused on policy ends. Hard issues are focused on policy means. So easy issues are, we want less abortion. Hard issues are, how can we best lower inequality in Europe? How can we best redistribute wealth? Easy issues have been on the agenda for a long time. Hard issues are newer to the political agenda. So this is how Carmines and Simpson define it. And people have picked this up. And at ASCOR, Magdalena and Rashid and Clay's wrote a piece recently showing that people are more likely to polarize on easy issues than hard issues. Johnston and Wronski show, for instance, that it's people are better able to tie their values and their personality to their position on easy issues than hard issues. So if I'm, let's say, authoritarian, it's easier for me to tie my authoritarianism to how I should stand on gay rights than it is to how I should stand on income redistribution. And what I think is done most often, and what we really look at in this paper, is that people are more likely to follow elites on hard issues than easy issues. So people already know where to stand on easy issues. People already know where they should be with regards to abortion or gay rights. But when it comes to hard issues, people don't know what goes with what, as Converse said. So on these issues, people are more likely to follow elite cues, or at least that's what people think. But we kind of think that this topic, although it's been highly cited and useful, has not really been thoroughly theoretically developed. So for instance, the concept of easy and hard issues are difficult to apply, and somewhat remains unclear what it means for citizens to experience an issue as easy or hard. It's generally kind of up to the eye of the beholder, or generally the researcher, where the researcher says, this is an easy issue, this is a hard issue. Nobody has gone really and tried to measure it in a direct way. Additionally, the same issues can be framed as about ends or means, right? So an issue about income redistribution, for instance, could be framed as, we want there to be less inequality. If you frame it as that, it seems like it's about ends and therefore an easy issue. If you make it, if you frame it as about how we reconfigure taxes to redistribute wealth, it becomes a hard issue. So that complicates the matter to a bit. And additionally, this concept of easy versus hard issues is related to a lot of other concepts, particularly salience, how important an issue is. So if you think back to the slide where I list topics that have been on the agenda for a long time, that's the same idea as a topic that is an important issue or a salient issue. And as Bullock recently pointed out in an excellent handbook chapter, no existing research permits us to distinguish these effects such that we can confidently attribute the effects of an issue to its salience rather than its easiness. So this is what kind of tackling these ideas and confronting these ideas is what we're trying to do in this paper, which we're almost done with and we'll send around soon. So what we're trying to do is clarify what it means to an experience in the issue as easy or hard at the individual level. So then we try to validate this measure that we created of issue difficulty and evaluate the effects of issue difficulty on partisan cue taking. See, like, does it have the effects that so many people have applied it would have versus maybe issue importance? So we argue that issue difficulty as a concept is pretty similar to the concept of issue clarity, which has been developed in psychology. Carmines and Stimson say that the issue difficulty refers to an issue's capacity to elicit gut responses that require no conscious calculation of policy benefits. So this seems to us to kind of indicate that it implies that people are already clear on where they should stand on it. They don't have to think through anything. They can just automatically say their preferences on it. And this is similar to the concept of attitude clarity, which Petrocelli and all define as a ready-made response for survey researchers. So we argue that an issue is easy for an individual when he or she doesn't have a subjectively clear opinion on the issue, and it's hard when they do not. So to measure this, we simply, and get a gut responding, we simply just ask people how clear they are on each issue. So here's what we do. I think I will make it through most of this. Study one is we'll create and validate a difficulty scale. Study two, we validate it some more, and we test whether difficulty matters for cue taking. So here are the goals for the first study. We validate the individual level measure of the issue difficulty that we create. In the paper, we do it in a number of different ways, but I have time for a couple. One is we talk about face validity, and the issues that we think of as easy or hard rated as easy or hard by respondents. In concurrent validity, does issue difficulty relate to values? So if you remember, I said that a number of people have argued with Johnson and Wronski, Gorin, that people have an easier time applying their values to easy issues than hard issues. So if this is the case, we should expect a higher correlation between how value driven an issue is and how easy or hard it is. Another question we had is issue difficulty really a feature of the issue, or is it a feature of the individual? Does issue difficulty vary more by individual? So do individuals vary more within an issue than issues vary across issues? And then we also ask if we can disentangle issue difficulty from importance. Is it the same concept? So this is what we do in study one. It's a quota matched representative sample. forthright research. Forthright is generally better quality than other firms that we've used, and it's non-probability, but it's representative. And what we did is we asked people to rate 3 of 24 policy issues. I'll show you what these policy issues are in a minute. And they rated their preferences on a basically left-right scale, how for or against each issue you are. They answered a set of questions designed to measure issue difficulty and issue importance. And then we asked them a set of items from Skitka and Morgan, which measured whether or not they saw these issues as tied to their moral values. So these are the issues that we talked about. I won't talk about each, but you can see that there's a bunch of easy issues. So like abortion is the canonical easy issue. Replacing missile defense is a hard issue. We added our own issues in here as well, just to kind of expand it. But you see that there's a variation here on what scholars have defined as easy or hard. If there's no blank here, it means no one has defined it. So these are our issue difficulty items that we originally came up with. How difficult is the issue of whatever policy they were assigned to understand? How certain are you to know enough about the issue of policy to state a position? How certain are you that the position you chose on the issue of whatever policy reflects your true thoughts and feelings? And to what extent is your true attitude toward the policy clear in your mind? The first item was a new one we tried out. I'll talk about why we tried it out, or yes, how successful we were at it. The second through fourth are from pre-existing clarity items.
Sorry, if number 2 is original too.
2 is original too. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great. So we were somewhat successful. We were 50% of the way there. So this is just a factor analysis of these items. And these are the loadings of each item on one dimension. As you can see here, it's 2, 3, and 4 were loaded highly on this factor. Item 1 did not do so well. And you see in terms of uniqueness, it's already very different from these other ones. So we nixed that one. We took it out of the scale. We also asked about issue importance. These are the three items. How important is the issue to you personally? And these all were fairly internally consistent. And then these are the moral conviction items from Morgan and Skitka, where we asked how connected is your position on this policy to your beliefs about rights or wrongs? How much is your position on policy a reflection of your core moral beliefs and convictions? And how much is your policy position on moral principle? So again, highly internally consistent. So the first thing we do is look at face validity. So basically, how do these issues, what is the mean issue difficulty according to our scale across issues? And again, you see the mean score. Just a second, I'm gonna share something. Should have done this earlier. Put the a link to the presentation there if you want to look at it. So these are the means across policies. You see here, for instance, the mean difficulty of abortion is low, is the lowest, which is what we were hoping to find. Mean difficulty for these harder items are higher. So at least with regards to face validity, this seems to be in line with what we expect. The only weird one we think is provide aid to minorities, which Luskin defines as easy. We find it to be more middling. So we validate this in a bunch of different ways in the paper, but one way we do it is to see if it's related to core values or to the value scale. And so we expect the more difficult an item is, the less correlated it is to someone's values. And so we just basically regressed it in a multi-level model because people were asked multiple issues. So there was, we just put it in long form and with random intercepts for subjects. And these are all, this is rescaled from 0 to 1 every item here, and you see that there is a strong relationship, that moving from lowest to highest difficulty reduces connection to values by more than half of the scale. And this is the effect, quote unquote, the effect, the correlation goes down if you add importance, but it's still quite strong. So I've shown you phase validity, shown you concurrent validity. The next kind of substantive question we had was whether this is really a feature of policies or if it's a feature of individuals. So these are box plots, means centered around the individual means, to kind of deal with differential item functioning. So it's centered around 0 here of how much variation there was with between respondents for each issue. So what you should be reading here is not necessarily the mean difficulty, but just kind of how widely dispersed these are. You see here, there is quite a bit of variation. These are the interquartile range here. So 75% of people were right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but and then if you just look at the variation of the means across issues, you see there's very little variation. I mean, yes, there's far more. Each one of these cases has hundreds of people, or dozens at least of people, and this is 24 points. But you see that the range is far more restricted for issue means than within each individual issue. Another way we can get around this is kind of run a multi-level model and see how much variance respondent level factors explain versus issue level factors explain in variation of issue difficulty. So we simply regressed issue difficulty on an issue on a random intercept for subjects and a random intercept for policy and compare the variance. And that's here, right? So the variance explained by individuals is 0.21 versus the variance explained by policies is almost 0, it's 0.05. So we think that this point raises the point that issue difficulty really seems to be more about how individuals perceive an issue than how an issue is objectively. And then finally, with study 1, we sought to disentangle difficulty from importance. And I'm also showing you this because we use it in study 2. But these are the mean issue difficulty scores centered. And these are the mean issue level importance. And you see that they are strongly correlated, but they're not perfectly correlated. They're correlated at about 0.5, I think. And what you see, and what I think is, well, first let me show you, like, the legality of abortion is considered a highly important issue that is very easy. While tightening limits on class action lawsuits is not that important, and it's very difficult. So you see this relationship, and why I'm showing you this is because in study 2, we use this to randomly assign people to easy and hard issues. So here's study 2. Our goal here was to validate again whether this scale, and we use Carmen's and Stimson's definition of easy versus hard issues, where an easy issue, that the easy issues should correlate equally strongly with vote choice for people low in political sophistication as high sophistication, while hard issues should only correlate with vote choice for people with high sophistication. And finally, I turn to the experiment. So this is a 2-wave experiment conducted on Mechanical Turk. We chose a set of 12 policy issues, and we chose them so that they were in the different quadrants of the plot I just showed you. And people were provided their issue positions and rated the difficulty and importance of 3 randomly chosen policies from a set of 12. 1 week later, they completed a party Q experiment, which I'll show you in a second. And since we have their individual levels of ratings of importance and difficulty, we can look at the effect of how difficult they found an issue or how important they found an issue and whether or not that moderates party Qs. So these are the issues we chose. As you see, we tried to kind of maximize differences in difficulty and importance. And so people were randomly assigned to 3 of these 12. So first question is whether if an issue difficulty moderates the relationship between issue positions and vote choice. Carmines and Stimson argue that issue difficulty would moderate the correlation. The correlation between issue positions and vote choice would be stronger among the politically sophisticated than the less politically sophisticated for hard issues. The correlation between issue positions and vote choice would be about the same among the more politically sophisticated and the less politically sophisticated among easy issues. So we had this political awareness battery, which was a bunch of current events questions that we got from the New York Times. We split it up into tertiles, low, medium, and high, and calculate the correlation between issue positions and vote choice, voting for Trump versus Biden in 2020. So I'll show you this first. These are in the right-hand column, you see mean issue difficulty. These are the correlations with vote choice for low, medium, and high. These are the difference between low and high sophistication. So you see, this is a low. Let me go to one that's more clear. This is a difficult issue here, 2.08. This one is clearly an outlier. But you see here that the correlation between vote choice and this issue, policy issue, among the high sophisticates is 0.49. It's very weak among the low sophisticates. Here is an easy issue, providing government healthcare. And you see that the difference between low and high is much smaller. So, as you can see here, the correlation is not perfect, but here's another way of looking at it. This is the mean correlation between low and high, the absolute difference between the correlations between low and high. And then each dot is an issue. And this is mean difficulty of that issue. And you see kind of a fairly strong positive correlation that's significant. So finally, I think I'm going to get all 41 slides of my 20-minute talk or 30-minute talk in. Does difficulty matter when it comes to opinion leadership? So we did kind of a classic party Q study. So people were randomly assigned these issues, and they were asked, the issues that they had rated previously, and they either saw a vignette, a question that was without party cues. So some argue that the government should blah, critics argue that the other parties should blah. Where do you stand? Or a question with party cues. So Republicans argue that electricians should blah. Democrats argue that electricians should blah. So these people were randomly assigned to one of these two. And the DV was whether or not the participant took the party consistent position. Did the Democrat take the Democratic position? Did a Republican take the Republican position? And the estimand, what we're kind of interested in, is the interaction between individual level issue difficulty and individual level issue importance and party Q positions. So based on the literature, we expect that people are more likely to take party Qs. Party Qs will matter more for difficult issues than easy issues. We also expect that issues that are more important will have less of an effect. So with regards to issue difficulty, so this is issue ease. So we should have reverse scored this, but 4 is how easy it is. 1 is very difficult, very easy. And this is the effect of party branding. So this is the interaction effect. And you see a 0. There's almost 0 effect. I think it's pretty, I don't know if it's a precise null, but it's pretty close to no effect of difficulty on moderating the effect of party cues. However, when it comes to issue importance, we do find this expected effect where issue salience or issue importance has a very strong effect, where more important issues moderate that the effect of party brands have no effect on very important issues, but have a strong effect on less important issues. So to recap, we developed a short battery of issue difficulty that behaves as we expect expect it to. We find that issue difficulty is better thought of as a feature of individuals than issues, and that issue difficulty has a fairly precise null effect on party Q taking, which is inconsistent with the literature. So in kind of some discussion points is that issue difficulty is strongly related with issue importance, and a lot of what people found in the past may be explained by salience or some other feature that is related to difficulty. This is not to say that issue difficulty isn't important. It still seems to matter a lot for understanding public opinion. We still see, for instance, that issue difficulty still teaches us which issues are driven by values and personality. In the paper, we also do this with people's actual positions, and find that issue difficulty moderates the relationship between having some of Schwartz's more conservative values and policy positions. And easy issues are better predictors of vote choice than hard issues. So Carmens and Simpson were right on this point, even controlling for awareness, importance, and other stuff. That is all I have. Thanks so much.
Thank you a lot. Thanks for the interesting presentation. We come now to the Q&A part. And again, as Bert already introduced, you can write your questions that you have into the Q&A box that you find at the bottom of the screen, and we will then read it out. The people who are here in the room here in Amsterdam, they can, of course, ask the questions directly. Since there's no question yet in the Q&A box, is there anyone here in Amsterdam who wants to ask the first question? Oh, Bert already has a question. Okay, go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I find it's nice that you developed a scale, right? And the scale is short, 4 items, which is, and I'm actually gonna ask the opposite question that you might expect from some of our work, that you don't need very long questions, but the question here is, do we need the 3 or 4 items, or could you sell this to, say, the ANES to say, well, it actually is enough to do this with 1 item or 2 items? So the question is, did you look at the extent to which you need the correction for measurement error by having multiple items, or would 1 item give you basically the same set of results? Because that would make it an easier sell to convince people to measure this, because if you start doing this by issue, it starts to add up quite a substantive amount of questions that you need to ask, because it's 3 or 4 items per issue, right? So the question is, can we scale it down?
Yeah, this was the opposite of what I thought you would say. So I don't know if this is how you feel about our paper anymore. But Nick, we didn't do that, but there's no reason why in the appendix we can't basically run each analysis, but only for each item separately. Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think the internal consistency is high enough that, yeah, Bert's right. I think we probably could get away with 1 item. I think that's worth looking at for sure, and definitely makes the sell easier. Yeah,
not for your own paper, right? But especially if you want other people to start using it, I guess that could increase the sell of this.
Thanks.
All right, so we already have 2 questions from the audience. The first question is from Diamantis Petropoulos Metalos. He says, thank you for your very informative and interesting work and presentation. My question relates to ideology, and to what extent do you think we can use easy issue difficulty to categorize respondents with respect to the ideology, and especially the extremity of it, so beyond vote choice?
I suppose it depends on what you think the like foundation of ideology is. If you think the foundation of ideology is values, as Yif and I tend to think, I think the answer is yes. I mean, I would suppose like issue difficulty. I suppose, yeah, more generally, it would be appropriate to judge people's ideology by the issues they understand, right? But I suppose that also depends on whether you think like elites can give people ideology. So I guess my answer is it has relevance, but you could take it a couple of different ways. What do you think, Yif?
Yeah, I would. I think it's a great question, and I think ideology is both top down and bottom up. And you know, as we show in the paper and partly show here, we show evidence of this bottom-up explanation where values lead to issue positions and therefore ideology more strongly among easy issues than hard issues. So there's a clear linkage between values and ideology from this bottom-up perspective using issue difficulty. However, issue difficulty has generally been applied in the top-down kind of ideology where elites kind of tell people what goes with what, and they're better at doing that with hard issues than easy issues. And we find that that's not the case, that issue difficulty is not important for top-down ideology. So I think it's a great question, and it depends on what mechanism you are thinking about in terms of ideology.
All right, we have one more question from Amanda Friesen. She says, thanks, Yphtach. This is a very helpful project for so many areas of research. Could you say more about what predicts perception or variation of difficulty? Are there gender, age, or partisan differences?
Nick, did you look at that?
I've looked at some of it. So there are partisan differences, but we weren't statistically powered to examine them, rigorously. But tentatively, we can say that Republicans tend to find issues easier across the board, regardless of what issue we're talking about, which is very interesting. Don't know exactly what that says, although it feels right. But we could, I think maybe another thing we can do in the appendix is examine some of these sources of variation. It's not something we've done in depth yet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this group would probably be okay with this statement, but that issue difficulty is really about seeing things in black and white terms, right? And Republicans and the right tend to do that more often. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me.
A question that I would have, I think you showed it in the presentation, but very quickly, how much do your results from study 1, where you categorize the issues, align with the previous classification that you contrasted with? I didn't really see that. Were there some issues where you found differences?
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough test because most of the time researchers are dealing with hard issues, I think, because it gives them more flexibility in the context of an experiment to vary things that they want to vary. But yeah, Yif will pull up the table, but basically everything we expected to be, there's almost perfect alignment. There's one issue that was designated as easy that was turned out to be middling as rated by our representative sample, but there's general consistency.
Yeah, so this is the distribution. One thing that we've kind of had trouble with is there's very few issues that are both difficult and important. Most issues fall along this kind of either difficult and or easy and important, or difficult and not important.
And the other question that I would have had, or Bert, you want to add something here?
Just a quick follow-up. What would be would it be that that once issues become important, that most people, they have thought long enough about them to not find them difficult anymore? So would you theoretically expect that quadrant to be filled?
I would expect it to, yeah, well, maybe among sophisticates, like people who have thought long and hard about, I don't know, NATO expansion or something like that. And they say, well, this issue has many sides. It's super important to the, you know, the safety of the world, but it's a complicated issue with many sides.
Yeah, but your questions are about whether or not the person finds it difficult, right? Not whether or not the issue itself is very complicated.
Yeah.
Right. So I find NATO expansion complicated, but given that I've thought about it, for me it's therefore not a very difficult issue any. Well, I think maybe if you ask the questions differently, you might get that quadrant filled more.
Yeah.
If you ask, even something like migration, probably if you prompted to say, well, this is actually complicated. Like, how are we handling the refugee, the number of Ukrainian refugees coming to particular countries? That could be become very complicated quickly.
Yeah. I mean, empirically, you seem to be right that there's not much.
Yeah.
I still think that theoretically, somebody can be ambivalent and think an issue is difficult.
Yeah.
But we just don't see that happen very much.
No. Not true.
All right, we have one more question from Natalie Giger. She says, great talk. I'm interested in the link between issue difficulty and issue importance and the direction of that link. Could we see a low importance or salience of an issue also as the consequence of its high difficulty?
Yeah, it's so basically, does difficulty cause salience? Are they not really different dimensions, but is there difficulty causing how important it is? And I mean, I'm speculating here, but I'm kind of thinking about kind of the psych literature about like things like familiarity leading people to think, like in the agenda setting literature, where things become more familiar to you and therefore you think they're more important. So I could certainly see kind of this this pathway, which may also explain why. I mean, we can't say much with regards to mediation with this data, but you do see that once you control for importance, the quote unquote effect of difficulty on values goes down quite a bit, which is consistent with the mediation story. But yeah, I think you're probably right, and it's an idea that's worth kind of thinking about how all these concepts live together in some sort of network and some sort of data generating process that we certainly haven't grappled with.
I mean, there's something to be learned about the attitude strength literature, where they're looking at different features of attitude strength, one of which is like clarity, one of which is importance. And I think it's safe to say, based on that literature, generally, like these constructs are definitely distinct. I think I have seen some experiments where they show one can have an effect on the other, but they're not. It's not like particularly strong effect, and certainly not enough evidence to suggest that these are like the same concept.
Yeah.
All right. Bernhard Klemm asks, have you also thought about measuring issue difficulty in a less self-reporting way, I guess, e.g., for instance, measuring how long people take to respond? Also, what do you think the link difference between individual level difficulty of a specific issue and knowledge of that specific issue? And a clarification here is that by how long to respond, I mean to the attitude question of that issue.
Yeah, that is, so we have response latencies for each issue, and that's an excellent point. So the question, basically, we would expect that easy issues are more top of mind and more quickly responded to, and that's on the agenda. I'm not sure, Nick, you've looked at that yet, but something we've thought of, and I think it's another kind of test, another way to validate this that we wanted to include.
Yeah, we definitely have those response latencies. I think we looked at them a long time ago, but we need to go back to it and add it in.
And then the second question is, what do you think the link is between? So, so what do you think the link is between individual level difficulty on a specific issue and knowledge on that specific issue? Oh, we would think that the more you know about an issue, the easier it is. And that's probably why there's so much variation within that we see, that some issues are going to be very easy for people and some issues are going to be very hard for issues. A NATO expert is going to find the issue of NATO expansion quite, I mean, maybe this is what Barrett was bringing up. An EU expert is going to find the idea of NATO expansion much easier than me, for instance.
Yeah. I think it's also worth saying, though, that I don't think, so one way, sort of like a niche way, I think one or two researchers have tried to measure issue difficulty is by asking people to list considerations, and then they approximate issue difficulty by the number of considerations that they can list about an issue. But I think that's problematic. So I think there is this relationship between how much you know about an issue and how difficult it is, but I don't think that's linear. That's a linear relationship. You can imagine, again, an ambivalent individual who knows a whole lot about an issue, but because they have this balanced set of considerations on both sides of the issue, they still experience it as difficult. So I think there's a relationship there, but I don't think it's perfect.
All right, one more question by Diamantis. He says, one more question, perhaps I missed it in the presentation, but why were respondents exposed to only 3 out of 28 or something issues? Only 3.
Yeah, Nick, you want to take it?
Time. I mean, just like we can only ask so many issues. Like we had a number of questions we were asking about each issue. We can only survey so many folks on so many issues before we hit like a 15-minute mark on the survey, and we were liable to get, bad responses.
Yeah, I would have one more question. What do you think? What's the role of the issue wording here in judging how difficult it is? Did you only present your respondents with these very short titles? Because I saw this, the one that was rated like the most difficult was called tightening limits on class action lawsuits, which already sounds very, very difficult. Whereas abortion is very, I mean, everyone knows what it means, right? But if you would phrase abortion as something, a longer thing about reproductive health, something.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I love that question. So yeah, Yphtach and I have talked a lot about this. So that's not all the information they get. They get like a short paragraph about the issue. So that addresses one part of your question, but I think you're right. I think this is important. You take the same issue and you frame it different ways, it's going to be more or less difficult. And I think that's part of what's so problematic about the Carmines and Stimson's requisites for easy issues and difficult issues, right? So it's like easy issues are about policy ends, hard issues about policy means, but you can talk about any issue in terms of means and ends. So yes, I think it would certainly, we haven't done this study, but I think it's certainly the case that you could take the same issue, frame it different ways, and get different responses.
Well, I will say that we tried a study 3 and we didn't make it past piloting, where we wanted to make the same issue hard or easy. And by, telling people there's more stuff to think about with regards to this issue, and it just didn't pass the manipulation check, where people didn't find our framing more difficult. So if you have ideas for how to make an issue easier or harder, we'd be glad to hear it.
Bert.
Yeah, I don't. I think that study free idea is really neat. If because that seems. I remember that we and one experiment also tried once to make something a little bit more complex, and that wasn't particularly successful either, and ended up somewhere in an appendix of a paper.
Yeah.
But would sort of ways of sort of say like a moral frame to like, would it be easier to make a hard issue easy if you add something like moral aspects to it? If you think a little bit about the Skitka line of thinking, could you then make something? What was an example of a really difficult issue? Was like the what was again in the big list that you had?
Replacing intermediate range missiles.
Yeah. So if you could make that about, would the framing there sort of more about sort of existential existence or something, right? That would it then become easier for people?
Yeah, that's what we should try that, Nick. I'm a little concerned that issue difficulty eventually just becomes synonymous with moralization.
Yeah.
Which is, maybe that's true. That's okay. But I think you're probably right that, I mean, that's what we find, that moral issues are easier. So why not just moralize an issue? And that it's probably a lot easier than all the things we were trying to do.
Yeah, we went a little crazy. We collected like 100 and some different considerations and like varied the considerations that people were seeing on 2 different issues. And it was unfortunately not successful for all the time we put into it.
You know each other, right?
What a partner bringing you chocolate.
Yeah, man, like that doesn't happen every day, but on camera these things occasionally happen scripted. No, I'll
At this time ahead of time. That 9:55 you bring me, or 3:55 you bring me.
If I'll also send you something that is a failed experiment that Vin Arsno and I did on trying to make something that was hard easy and something that was easy make it hard, and that didn't work either. So to show what we did, what failed as well, and never was written up afterwards. But I would it be, so what do you think, would it be easier to make hard issues easy or easy issues hard? Right? It seems to go from hard to easy, seems maybe the fruitfuler road, yeah. Right?
I think you're probably right. It'd be hard, no pun intended, it would be hard to make abortion, which people thought about all their lives, a difficult issue. I mean, I guess you can, like, even talking about the means verse of abortion, it still makes it seem pretty moralistic and easy. So yeah, I think you're right that it would probably be easier to just tell people that intermediate long range missiles is has moral implications.
Yeah. I have a last question for you. I really, I think the framing next to the Carmines and Stimson is obviously the way to go. But if you think about the bigger implications, what this means for democracy and citizen competence, could you elaborate a little bit how should we read your paper in that sense?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
So yeah, the neighbors are also redoing the house for weeks. So how would what are the implications of the set of findings we've seen here for democracy, sort of a little bit beyond sort of the Stimson and Carmine's work?
Yeah, so the original point that Carmines and Stimson make, that if we're going to judge how well people use issues, I think still stands. That issues still matter, but it really depends on the issue. It depends on the issue and the individual's understanding of the issue. If our only kind of criteria is, do people just think about issues? Are issues driven only by elites? It's not really, it's not really like that. Because easy issues are strongly correlated with vote choice. So the question is, I guess, are you okay with democracy being driven by easy issues? And then hard issues are decided by, are used only by the political sophisticates?
Yeah. I mean, I do think the fact that we're not seeing no particular set of issues is especially easy and no particular set of issues is especially hard suggests that there's not I think implicit in the Carmines and Stimson piece is that there are electoral blind spots. I think our research suggests that that's not really true, that maybe this issue public's idea is quite right and that there's a set of people paying attention and know enough about any particular issue. I mean, we looked at 24. And I think, so I think that's normatively important. I think also we find in this cue taking experiment that, yeah, people can resist party cues when issues are important. I think that's good. That's interesting. But also it suggests a particular model of partisan cue taking. So the fact that difficulty doesn't matter for partisan cue taking, but importance does, suggests that partisan cue taking, to me, it suggests that partisan cue taking is not about informational shortcuts. It's about cues to group norms. People care about following the group norm for the sake of following the group norm. They don't follow the party cue because, they don't understand what's going on. So I think there are positive aspects to that. I think there are negative aspects to that.
It's another opportunity to plug a paper by Bert and me.
Yeah, plug Bakker, Lelkes, Malka 2020.
That's always a good idea.
I try to sneak that in.
Hey, Nick and Yif, it's almost 4 o'clock or almost 10 o'clock in the United States.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for this excellent tour de force on this important topic, and really look forward to seeing the working paper and then seeing this coming out hopefully soon. Last minute, just a couple of announcements. So next week, March 18, we have Josh Kala from Yale, who will talk about give a talk titled "The Manifold Effects of Partisan Media on Viewers' Beliefs and Attitudes, a field experiment with Fox News viewers." Then the week after, March 25, Isabella Rebasso and Ernesto de Leon will give talks. Isabella will give a talk titled "Interest, Not Political Knowledge, Drives Emotional Responses to Politics." And Ernesto de Leon from University of Bern will give a talk titled "Walking Roads to Hyper-Partisan News, Online Intermediaries to COVID News During the Outbreak of the Pandemic." And then April 1st, that is not a joke, Rune Slothuis will come to tell us more about cues. Nick, he is actually giving a talk that you might want to attend titled "What's in a Cue? How Citizens Use Party Cues to Learn About a Policy." So maybe we can ask Rune some difficult questions based on what we've learned today. I hope to see many of you here in the coming weeks. Remember that as we are opening up, you can also join in Amsterdam if you are around, but obviously you're also welcome in the Zoom environment. So thank you very much. Hope to see you in the coming weeks again.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.